to another News 12 Vote 09 election special, everyone. I'm Brian Conybeare. Tonight, a live debate in the race for Westchester District Attorney. We have a panel of local journalists set to ask questions on the major issues in this race. We'll introduce them to you in just a moment. But first, let's meet the three major party candidates who hope to run the DA's office for the next 4 years here in Westchester in alphabetical order. First, we welcome Tony Castro. Mr. Castro is a Democrat currently running on the Independence and Working Families Party lines. He is a lawyer who spent 14 years as an assistant district attorney in the Bronx. He now lives with his family in Rye and practices law there. We also welcome the incumbent, Janet DeFiore. Ms. DeFiore is a Democrat currently seeking her second term as district attorney in Westchester. She also has Conservative Party support this year. She is a former judge who served 10 years as an assistant district attorney here in Westchester. She and her family live in Bronxville. We also welcome the Republican candidate, Dan Schor. Mr. Schor is also a former assistant district attorney here in Westchester and also in Queens. He's also an adjunct professor at Pace University Law School. He lives in White Plains. Thank you all for being here, candidates. Welcome to you. Now let's meet the panel of those journalists who will be questioning the candidates over the next 90 minutes. First, representing News 12 Westchester is our anchor and news director, Janine Rose. Ms. Rose has been covering local politics and elections here in Westchester for more than 2 decades. Good to see you as always, Janine. We also welcome Gerald McKinstry. Mr. McKinstry covers politics and government in Westchester County for the Journal News and LowHUD.com. He's been a reporter and editor for the paper in both Westchester and Rockland counties since 2001. Welcome to you, Gerald. We also welcome Catherine Chaffee from WCBS News Radio 880 AM. Ms. Chaffee is an award-winning journalist who's been covering local news and politics for the station for the past 5 years. She was born and raised here in the Hudson Valley. Welcome to you, panelists. Thank you for your input this evening as well. Now, before we begin the debate itself, here's a brief rundown of the ground rules, and frankly, it isn't really that brief. First, each candidate's going to have 2 minutes for their opening statements. Then our media panelists will ask the questions. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer the initial question. Both the other candidates will have the same amount of time for a rebuttal. A follow-up question will then be asked of the first candidate only, who will have 45 seconds to respond to that. There's no rebuttals on the follow-up questions. If a candidate goes over the allotted time, he or she will hear a bell. That would be the bell. That means they should immediately wrap up their answer. We're also going to have some questions from Westchester voters a little later on. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer those. And finally, the candidates will each have 2 minutes for their closing comments. Now, earlier, the campaigns picked numbers to determine the order for opening and closing comments. Mr. Schor, you will start. You have 2 minutes for your opening remarks, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank News 12 for hosting this debate, and I'd like to thank everyone for watching at home. I'm Dan Schor. I went to law school for one reason. I wanted to be a criminal prosecutor, and I wanted to specialize in the prosecution of domestic violence, child abuse, and sex crimes. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that, first in New York City and then in Westchester. I've worked with hundreds of victims of crimes. I've prosecuted those cases and murder cases. I know what it's like to get that call at 3 in the morning and go to a murder scene and work the case all night, writing a search warrant, questioning a defendant after taking Miranda. I know what it's like to get that call at 4 in the morning from a domestic violence victim who's set to testify in 5 or 6 hours and is scared about going into court to face her abuser. I've taken cases to juries, argued and won, and convicted people of charges of burglary, rape, domestic violence, and murder. And I believe it's the first role of government to keep us safe. Unfortunately, right now, the DA's office is not doing everything it can to keep us safe. We have a burglary rate that's gone up 7% since 2006. We have a murder rate that's gone up 35% in Westchester since 2006. And I want to change that. There are too many easy plea bargains letting violent criminals back out on the street. There's too much emphasis in the DA's office on getting a conviction for a conviction rate and not enough focus on the sentence that goes along with that conviction. We need to keep felons in prison, away from our communities, not back out on the street. And I want to support our police. Too often the police are risking their lives out there and they don't have the support from the DA's office. And I'm very honored to have the support of many police organizations in this county, such as the Westchester County Police, the White Plains Police, the PBA of Westchester County, the Westchester County Retired Police Association, and others. And one thing that's very important is that these organizations, every one that I just mentioned, never in the history of Westchester County have they endorsed a challenger in a race against an incumbent district attorney. But they have now because they're frustrated with the easy plea bargains and the disorganization in the DA's office. I want to change that. I want to be a fighter. I want to stop the rising gang violence. I want to be out there in the street with my ADAs working cases. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. Now, Mr. Castro, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement, sir.
Thank you. I, too, want to thank News 12 Westchester for sponsoring another debate involving one of the most important races in Westchester County, the race for district attorney. I believe voters have a right to know why we run and what motivates us to run. We bring important differences to this contest, but I'm motivated by professional, not political reasons. I believe the office of the district attorney has been mishandled by the current district attorney under whatever political label she chooses for herself. And that opinion, quite frankly, is shared by many throughout the law enforcement and legal communities. As a defense attorney, I learned firsthand the outright disregard for basic civil rights by the DA's office under the incumbent's watch. I had a client who was held for 4 days in a hospital room in police custody without access to his family or his counsel. We have all seen how the case of Irma Marquez was bungled, and the woman who committed no crime was prosecuted. At the same time, we're being overrun by an unprecedented wave of violent crime. Westchester County is not being kept safe. We have almost daily shootings and stabbings in places like Mount Vernon and Yonkers. We recently had 6 homicides in a 2-week period. We've had robberies and burglaries throughout the county. In some neighborhoods, people are afraid to step out of their homes. They fear for their safety. As a 14-year prosecutor in Bronx County, I prosecuted many violent criminals and protected many victims while always respecting everyone's civil rights. It's time that Westchester County has an experienced and independent district attorney. I look forward to discussing the issues that affect us all, the issues of criminal justice in Westchester County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castro. Now, Ms. DiFiore, you have 2 minutes to state your case, ma'am.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, News 12, for hosting and our panelists for participating. Over the past 4 years under my leadership, the District Attorney's Office has worked effectively and efficiently. We have one of the highest felony conviction rates in the state of New York. We are now working to prevent crime from being committed in our communities, and very importantly, we've done our work responsibly, returning $1.2 million in savings from our budget back to the county every year I've been the district attorney. During my tenure, violent crime has dropped by almost 14% here in Westchester, an all-time low. And this historic reduction has been achieved as a result of the strong work that we've done in the District Attorney's Office and the strong partnerships I have built with every police department throughout this county and including the surrounding counties. I'm exceedingly proud of the work we've done, but of course there's more work to be done. Our goal is to bring the same level of success that we've enjoyed throughout Westchester to the remaining few areas in the city of Mount Vernon and the city of Yonkers that have experienced a spike in violent crime. Over the next 90 minutes, I look forward to talking about all of the work that we've done to make Westchester one of the safest counties in which to live and raise our families, and the work we are doing to make certain that the same success is felt in every last neighborhood here in Westchester. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DiFiore. Now we're going to begin round 1 of our questions from the media panelists. The first will come from the home team, News 12 Westchester's Janine Rose. It will be directed to Janet DiFiore.
Thank you, Brian, and I do want to thank Ms. DiFiore, Mr. Castro, and Mr. Shore for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you here. Ms. DiFiore, on July 26, Diane Schuler killed herself and 7 others driving drunk and high the wrong way on the Deconic Parkway. The story went nationwide and was even discussed today on the Oprah Winfrey Show. You closed that case about a month later because the individual driving drunk was killed in that crash, but now family members of the victims want to see a grand jury convened to determine if any members of Schuler's family should bear some responsibility for the crash if they had prior knowledge of her problem, notably Diane Schuler's husband. Would you consider reopening this case should a grand jury be convened?
Thank you for the question, Janine. I don't believe that the family members are requesting that a grand jury presentation be open. In fact, I met with most of the family members very recently. This is a horrific crime of enormous proportion, and the families of these victims understand that this case has been thoroughly investigated by the New York State Police, by the medical examiner, by my office. Dozens of witnesses have been interviewed. All available videotapes leading up to the hours immediately before the crash have been reviewed and investigated. And the information that has been developed in this case leads to one conclusion. The only person against whom criminal charges could have been filed in that case died in that accident, and that is Mrs. Schuler. And make no mistake about it, had Mrs. Schuler survived that crash, she would have been charged with the homicides of those 7 innocent people. There has been no evidence developed during the course of that investigation that would lead us to responsibly convene a grand jury. I know that Mr. Schor has joined in the request for a grand jury presentation. I'm not sure where or why he thinks that that is appropriate, maybe particularly to get a headline. I'm not sure. That case has been thoroughly investigated. There isn't a shred of evidence that would require us at this point in time to open a grand jury presentation, and that has been confirmed by 2 district attorneys and the New York State Police.
Thank you, Ms. DiFiore. Mr. Castro, your take on the tragedy on the Taconic, and should there be a grand jury impaneled?
Well, as I said at the last debate, I've indicated that there's absolutely no reason why the case should have been closed so early. Absolutely no legal reason. There are still many unanswered questions. My feeling has always been that people should have been brought before the grand jury. They should have been made to testify under oath, and we would see what kind of evidence could be developed. Possibly there could be such things as endangering the welfare of a child, as well as other crimes. But we don't know that until we bring these people into the grand jury and have them testify under oath. And that's always been my position.
Thank you, sir. All right, Dan Schor, you have 90 seconds on the same subject, grand jury and the tragedy on the Taconic.
It's very important that we convene a grand jury to investigate this terrible tragedy, and if I'm the district attorney, I will convene one in January. There are too many people who died and too many unanswered questions for this case to be rushed to a close. I've talked at length with the Bastardi family. They're adamant that they want a grand jury investigation, and they've told me they've met with the district attorney and they come away with more questions than answers every time they do. We have a woman who drove drunk and high on the Taconic. 8 people are dead. Anyone who saw her get in that car with those children could be complicit. Someone who gave her alcohol, gave her drugs, talked to her on the phone, knew what she was doing. These people may be responsible. What we can do, and I've done this, you could bring everyone in front of a grand jury, question them under oath, and find out what the truth is. This is necessary because we know we're not getting all the facts from all the people involved. And there's no reason to close the case now. There's no harm from getting a full and complete investigation. This is too serious. And people in Westchester need to know that drunk driving is being seriously prosecuted and looked at in this county. And this has to be looked at by a grand jury.
Thank you, Mr. Schor. Ms. Rose, you can ask a follow-up question now that will be for Janet DiFiore only. She'll have 45 seconds to respond.
Yeah, Ms. DiFiore, Mr. Schor led me to the follow-up. You know, what harm would it do to put people like Diane Schuler's husband under oath before a grand jury? If there's anything that might possibly be learned, and there are questions about his behavior, there are questions about the fact that he was the last person with Diane Schuler prior to her getting in that car, should he not be questioned under oath?
There is no evidence that Mr. Schuler had any indication that his wife was in an intoxicated or high condition. In fact, we have videotape evidence right before the crash took place that indicates the direct opposite. We do not move the grand jury based on hunches. We move the grand jury and we use the power of the government when it is appropriate. It would not in this case be appropriate because there is not a shred of evidence that has been uncovered that anyone could be charged with a crime. The investigation was not closed too early or closed too late. The investigation was conducted at the appropriate pace, the pace dictated by the circumstances that were uncovered, and it was closed at the appropriate time.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is going to come from the Journal News and Gerald McKinstry. It will be for Tony Castro.
Mr. Castro, you call yourself the true Democrat throughout the primary, yet after losing the primary, you considered running for a state judgeship on the Republican line. Why was that even a consideration for you?
It's very simple. A judgeship involves a non-political position. And I will add that I was honored that I was screened by the Republican Judicial Screening Committee in which there were many notable attorneys and civic leaders, and they all found me qualified and were pleased to have me represent their party. In addition to that, there were other Republican civic leaders that would have been pleased to have me on board. I will add to that that before I entered the primary, there were many Democratic leaders as well that urged me to run for judge. So I am flattered that so many people, notable people, find me qualified to run for judge, a non-political position. I was doing it, as I said, because I have always felt that I want to be a public servant and I want to serve the public as best as I can. I was a prosecutor in the Bronx for 14 years. I want to continue in that capacity. But after giving it some thought, I realized that the problems with our criminal justice system in Westchester County do not lie with the judiciary. They lie with the district attorney's office.
Thank
and
you,
I remain in the race.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Castro. Now, Mr. Shore, kind of a specific question for Tony Castro, but political party labels have been an issue in this race. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, there's no real party label that can tell someone that someone's going to be good on crime. You have to be looking at the individual person and determine whether they have the experience actually working with crime victims, actually trying cases, that kind of experience that will lead you to believe that they will be tough on crime. And I've seen the crime that's out there, first in New York City and then in Westchester. I know how to work with the police. I know how to take cases to trial. I know how to work with victims, and I'm going to be tough on crime. I started my career working for Richard Brown, the DA of Queens. He was a Democrat, and he was as tough on crime as anyone I've ever met. And I'm running as a Republican, so I think Democrats and Republicans certainly can be tough on crime. We all want to be safe in Westchester. It's a common concern for all of us.
Now to Mrs. DiFiore. You obviously started as a Republican, are now running as a Democrat. That has been a bit of an issue. What's your take on this whole party label thing when it comes to fighting crime?
When it comes to fighting crime, and particularly when it comes to the district attorney's office, this office isn't about politics. In fact, this office is purely apolitical in its work and its approach to public safety and meeting the public safety needs of everyone here in this county. And as a very famous district attorney, Frank Hogan, once said, there is no Republican or Democrat way to fight crime, only the right way and the effective way. I think people in this county and throughout this state understand that and appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, back to Gerald McKinstry. You can ask a follow-up question for Tony Castro only.
Yes, Mr. Castro, during this race, you said that it's inappropriate to take endorsements or to accept endorsements from PBAs. This is the first election that you've done that. Can you explain your logic, and have you turned away any endorsements?
No, I did not seek any endorsements, as I indicated at the outset over a year ago. The reason is very simple, because there's either a conflict or an appearance of a conflict of interest. And we've seen a number of cases within the last 4 years. For example, we saw the Marquez case, where the officer Simos dropped this woman on her head, this victim, and yet she was prosecuted, and as far as I know, there was no investigation done with Simos. That was one of the reasons I decided not to take the endorsements. There are many other cases. There was the Ridley case, which I think, and I respect the grand jury decision not to indict the county police officers. I respect it and I agree with it based on the evidence that was presented. But on the other hand, I think the case was mishandled.
Thank you, sir. All right, now we're going to go to our third panelist tonight, Catherine Chaffee of WCBS News Radio 880. Your first question will go to Mr. Shore.
Mr. Shore, you held a news conference on Monday where you stated that you wanted to create a new ombudsman position in the county DA's office if you're elected, to act as a liaison between the police departments and the DA's office, so they would be able to express criticism of the DA's office, express criticism of the way certain cases are handled. There are some that feel that this is a waste of taxpayer dollars, that this is creating another position in government that's a government that's already exceedingly large. What do you say to those who say creating this position would be a waste of taxpayer dollars in an already difficult financial time?
Well, thank you. I don't want to create a new position in terms of bringing a new person who will get a new salary into the DA's office. What I want to do is I want to designate someone who's already an employee of the DA's office to be accessible and responsible to police all the time if they have any concern about how any of their cases are being handled, that they can go directly to this person, and if they want, they could get confidentiality and talk about their concern. And this stems from what happened in Pleasantville. We had a career criminal who was arrested 30 times, burglarizing many homes, terrorizing the community. He'd been arrested over and over again, And the DA kept letting him out on another easy plea bargain after another easy plea bargain. And finally, a 27-year veteran of the Pleasantville Police Department, decorated veteran, stated publicly that he was frustrated that the DA's office wasn't keeping their word. They were letting this person out again and again to prey on the community. And in response to that, he was let go. Well, first of all, he was suspended without pay, and then he had to resign from his job. I want the police out there to know that if they have a complaint with any case that I'm handling as district attorney, they can speak up, and I will never seek to sanction or punish them. And if I hear of an individual department punishing any police officer solely for criticizing me, I will stand up for that officer. I was at the hearings for Detective Sergeant Benura. I watched him being put what was in virtually a trial based on the comments he said about Ms. DiFiore, and she didn't state anything to protect him. She didn't send any representative. This is wrong. Police officers should be able to speak freely. They're the front lines of law enforcement. They see problems that the DA needs to know about, and I want to be accessible to them.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. Ms. DiFiore, your turn on an ombudsman, and what about that case in Pleasantville?
I think that what Mr. Shore just said demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of the role of the district attorney. First of all, as to the ombudsman, it's a totally unnecessary position, and it compromises the integrity of the district attorney's office. First and foremost, the police commissioners and chiefs in this county, the command staff, the supervisors, and certainly the presidents of every police union are not shy about speaking up when they have an issue and they need to represent an interest of a member or supervisor or member of their union. By putting a person on staff who is entitled or empowered to receive confidential information is beyond anything that I could ever imagine having in the district attorney's office. We have Brady obligations, we have ethical obligations that we must follow, and quite frankly, it's an idea that demonstrates a complete lack of understanding about the district attorney's office and our role vis-a-vis the police. Of course I didn't send someone to an internal disciplinary hearing for a police officer. That's not my role. I would never insinuate myself, and I didn't insinuate myself in the disciplinary proceedings that went on in the village of Pleasantville. It's not my business, and I didn't become involved in that.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, Tony Castro, your take on an ombudsman position and the whole Pleasantville issue.
Well, I think that obviously the police should have trust in the district attorney, and they should be able to go directly to the district attorney with any issues, particularly anything involving confidentiality. I did follow the Detective Sergeant Benura case to some extent, and allegedly he ended up being fired because of a vindictive and retaliatory action on the part of the district attorney. If that's the case, I think it's very unfortunate. But there was a hearing, there was testimony at the hearing. I personally did not attend it. I understand Dan was there, so he's in a better position to speak on the facts than I am. But that's very unfortunate because the police, law enforcement has to have complete trust in the district attorney. If there are any questions or concerns, they should be able to go directly to the district attorney. And there should be a relationship of trust and mutual respect between the DA's office and the law enforcement community.
All right, thank you, sir. One clarification, Detective Sergeant Stephen Benura in Pleasantville was not fired. He was suspended without pay for a time, and eventually he resigned his position. All right, let's go back to Catherine Chaffee, a follow-up for Dan Shore only.
Mr. Shore, to date, you've been a prosecutor, but you have not held elected office. If you are elected, what makes you feel that you're ready for the task at hand?
Because I've actually built the cases and tried the cases that will lead me to make this office stronger. I know what it's like to be at the murder scenes, work a case, and take it to trial. I've worked with hundreds of crime victims, especially domestic violence, child abuse, and sex crimes victims. I know what it takes. The current DA does not have experience trying cases. I don't know if she's ever questioned witnesses, looked a jury in the eye, and gotten them to convict. I know what it's like. I know how hard it is. It takes a lot of tough work. And also I'm qualified because I'll fight for cases. I'm not just going to say that crime is down while gangs are terrorizing our county and murder is up 35%. I'm going to fight back. I'm going to stop the easy plea bargains. I'm going to push to keep felons in prison away from our communities. And that's the difference. And that's what I'm going to bring to the DA's office. Experience, real experience in the streets working with cops.
Thank you, sir. All right, panelists, all very good questions in round one there. Thank you very much. We're going to hear tonight from local voters from time to time as well. Over the last week or so, News 12 cameras were out talking to regular folks across Westchester. We asked them to pose a question for the DA candidates. The first comes from a woman named Mary, and it concerns drunk driving.
We need to do something when bars do not put a stop to people and their drinking. We need to do closer watch on stores selling alcohol to even a borderline age. Kids are giving money to adults to buy alcohol for them. And what about parents that are buying alcohol? As a DA, I think you need to look at all of these aspects, as well as going into schools and educating the school system, the children, that alcohol is a big problem.
Alcohol is a big problem. Let's start with Janet DeFiore. Can we crack down on this? Are you addressing this as the DA?
Certainly we're addressing this as the district attorney, particularly underage drinking, where we go into the schools and into the parent community to talk to parents about how to keep their children safe, talk to children about good and safe choices to make. We conduct compliance checks throughout the county to make certain that shop owners and barkeepers are in compliance with the law that prohibits the sale of alcohol to minors. In terms of DWI crimes and DWI fatalities, I have taken a stronger stance on those crimes than any of my predecessors ever have. We are making certain that people are convicted of those crimes and are appropriately punished and placed into treatment, and we're keeping the road safer. In terms of DWI cases involving drivers with children in the car, we're at the forefront of charging in those cases, in addition to the DWI crime, the endangering of the welfare of the child, to make certain that our work not only addresses the criminal justice issues, but the charging of the endangering crime allows us to go beyond the criminal case, involve child protective services, and make certain the child is safely returned to a home that is safe and a parent that will not drink and drive with the child in the car.
It is only 1 minute on these questions, so that's a little shorter time. Thank you. Mr. Castro, your take on underage drinking and DWI?
I know that efforts have been stepped up throughout the state, not only in the county, but throughout the state with respect to underage drinking and DWIs. With respect to the underage drinking, I do think it's very important that outreach programs meet in schools and various community centers with these children and educate them on the dangers of alcohol. I have 2 small children myself. They're a little bit young at this point, but I'm thinking ahead, and I think they need to be well informed on the dangers of alcohol. With respect to the DWIs, there have been many arrests. I do think that in certain cases, the person shouldn't just be charged with a DWI. They should be charged with even other crimes, such as reckless endangerment, depending on the facts of the case. But it is very serious. I know that the enforcement has been stepped up, and I'm happy to see that, and I will continue that as district attorney.
Thank you, sir. Dan Shore, you have a minute on DWI and underage drinking. What would you do if elected?
Well, as far as underage drinking, we need to be tougher on that. We need to stop people from selling alcohol to our kids, but we need to take it a step further. There's an epidemic going on right now where kids are taking prescription drugs from their parents' medicine cabinets, and they're getting together in what they're calling farm parties, and they're sharing prescription drugs, and kids are getting very seriously hurt, and there's even been some deaths lately. So it's not just drinking, it's drugs. It's a major problem that the DA needs to be more aggressive in educating people about. Now, as far as DWI, obviously the most terrifying DWI incident recently was the Diane Schuler case, but Ms. DeFiore won't even convene a grand jury to see if anyone else might have been involved. Anyone who saw her get in the car, knew that she was drunk, knew that she was on drugs, they would be legally complicit. They could answer questions under oath, and we could answer all the unanswered questions. As we said before, the Bastardi family, they're asking for a grand jury. It doesn't cost the taxpayers anything because the grand jury already sits. I've done these investigative grand juries in New York City and in Westchester. That's how we get tough. That's how we send a message.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. All good answers, candidates. Thank you. We have to take a quick break here, but we'll be back in 2 minutes with more of this Vote 09 election special here on News 12. Don't go away. It's going to be an interesting hour.
On election night, turn to the team that has you covered.
The local election results from all over Westchester and the Hudson Valley.
Live coverage from candidate headquarters.
People are very happy about those numbers.
Analysis from our political experts and up-to-the-minute results. Watch News 12 special live coverage. It's Vote 09. Tuesday, November 3rd, starting at 9 p.m. News 12. Only on cable, never on Fios, never on satellite.